Here at Psych with Mike, we are committed to delivering the best, clinically sound psychology information that we possibly can to our audience. Brett and I have decades of clinical experience as well as educational experience, and we want to make sure that we're able to deliver that to the audience and that always be free. So after 2 years, to be able to take the show to the next level, we are going to open ourselves up to advertising. But before that can happen, we need everybody who hears this message to follow the link that is on the show notes on the podcast page or is on the show notes in the YouTube. Click on that link and fill out a survey that is literally 10 seconds long, so it won't take you more than 10 seconds. Do it right now. I'll wait. Okay, so see, that was really fast and really easy, and it's going to help us to be able to attract advertisers to the show and be able to take the show to the next level. Thanks for listening, and we hope that you enjoy Psych with Mike.
Be happy.
Yeah. And
did you turn the mic on?
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew you had. You thought I burst out in song.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah. We were talking about a song that is in a Disney movie.
I don't know.
Isn't Don't Worry, Be Happy? Oh, no. That's Hakuna Matata.
Well, it's the same difference.
Yeah, but it's the same difference. Right.
So I went to Disney World when my child was about 7.
Mm-hmm.
Took him there, and we stayed in Safari Land.
Mm-hmm.
And they took us to our room. We got there late afternoon, early evening, and they took us to our room, and it was a million miles down twisted corridors. And we get into our room, and my wife looks at me and says, "We didn't get some piece of information. You need to go back down the front desk and get it." So I said, okay, and I loped back down all those miles of corridors. I got to the front desk, and I said, "My wife is concerned. We didn't get this piece of information. She doesn't know what time this or that happens and what we need to do to arrange for participating." And the man looked at me and he said, "Tell her.
Don't worry.
Hakuna Matata."
Did you tell her that?
I did indeed.
And what did she say?
She said, "Give me that piece of paper."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would imagine she didn't think that was funny.
She actually admires humor.
Oh.
Just not mine.
Well,
but it wasn't mine. It was Disney.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think that it's that she doesn't admire humor. I would think that
I don't hit the mark.
A wife who has directed her significant other to go perform a task, who comes back and says, "Don't worry, be happy." In my experience, I'm just saying, from my experience, that would not be something that I would project would go well.
And I would agree with you, knowing your wife.
Yeah. So maybe it's just about the difference in wives.
I don't know.
Maybe that's the thing. Oop. I'm breaking the equipment.
Yeah.
So I was telling you before we went hot with the mics that when I first met you, so for people who don't know, although I don't know if anybody listens to this podcast even semi-regularly, they would probably know this, that I met you as a graduate professor in grad school.
Right.
And I took all of the classes that you offered. And the last class was, and you may not remember this, the last class was over the summer. And at the end of the class, I was
heartbroken.
Crestfallen.
Yeah,
yes.
Crestfallen. That's a good word.
That was going to be the end. And so I waited until everybody else had left, and I walked out to the parking lot with you, and I said, I don't know if you would ever do this, but I was just thinking maybe we could get lunch or something together. And you said, "Oh, I would absolutely be willing to do that. Call me." And then I didn't call you for months.
Yeah.
Because I was terrified. I was like, he's just saying that to be nice.
Right.
He's if I call him up to go to lunch, he'd be like, "Oh, okay." He'd go one time because he'd feel obligated because he said that.
But obviously, you finally did call.
Yeah, I did, and
here we are.
Here we are.
25 years
later. And but the point of that story is that when I first met you was in group therapy. I was turning 30 years old.
You had a ponytail.
I had a ponytail. That's right.
Yeah,
you want to tell that story?
You had a ponytail, and you always wore a leather jacket, and you were in a class where you were the only male, and maybe a dozen females, many of whom were somewhat aggressive in their approach to masculine encounters.
Somewhat?
Somewhat. And you hung in there. You took a lot of shots. We had good discussions, good exchanges. At least I felt like I was trying to moderate them, so I don't know if the women would agree, but I felt like they went well. And at some point toward the end of the semester, I said to you, Michael, if you want to be taken seriously in this profession and be able to put yourself out to the world at large as someone to come and see, you're going to have to lose the ponytail.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, I have rights. My job can't tell me to cut my hair.
Mm-hmm.
And you had a job at a hospital at that time. And I said, absolutely. I'm just telling you, it's a market-driven service. And if you can't appeal to the masses that come, then you won't make a living.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe that you can do that if you keep that ponytail. And so for those who have access to a camera and are watching this, they will see that you no longer have a ponytail. Actually, you don't have a whole lot of hair.
I don't have a whole lot of hair left. Yeah, that's right. That's right. But I cut I went home that night, and I don't think that I was able to go to a haircutting facility that night, but I went the next day and cut that hair off, and I have never...
Oh, I don't think I knew that part of the story.
Yeah,
I just knew that eventually you cut it off.
No, I did it, well, because a part of it was that my job had said, go home and cut your hair, and if you don't cut your hair, don't come back tomorrow. So I was kind of up against it. But, this was group therapy class, and I was actually using that class as a way of processing things,
right. Well,
which I think is what you wanted.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think a lot of people in the program did that because it's super intimidating.
Well, it is. And when you're teaching that class, and I've had this conversation with other professors, how, as a professor, do you do that without violating the whole HIPAA stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And I always try to make the point, only share what you're willing to share. You do not have to share anything personal, but you have to engage. You have to practice, because this is a learning class. You have to practice your attending skills. You have to practice reflective listening, empathy, compassion. You have to interact with one another really. And I don't want to play fake scenarios. Pretend to be your mother. Pretend to be a mother of a 10-year-old boy who's out of control and say what you would say. I don't like that. I never use that approach in teaching. I said, be a real person. Talk about something that's real to you. But edit what you share. Don't share anything that don't come in and say my grandfather molested me unless you're willing to share that and get some feedback.
And I went into the class very aware that for whatever reason, turning 30 was the closest thing to an existential crisis that I've ever had.
Wow.
And I think it's because when I was younger and doing a lot of drugs and getting arrested and going to jail,
I would have thought those would have been existential crises.
No, because that was my life. That was what I knew.
Okay. That makes sense.
But my conceptualization was that I was going to live out the old adage. I was going to die young and live hard, love fast. Yeah. And so reaching 30 and being in grad school was a real come to Jesus moment for me, because I had to figure out, how am I going to transition from this ne'er-do-well lifestyle that I had led up to that point to being an actual person in a committed relationship with a child, trying to build a career. And that was not something, I'd never had a model for that. No one in my family had ever done that.
Right.
And so that I was swimming in deep water. I couldn't touch bottom. And I thought at that time that I was convinced that you were an existential practitioner.
I'm sorry. Maybe you should explain what you mean by that.
Well, so existential psychology is a brand of psychology that deals, a lot of people talk about that it is a death psychology, that the primary motivational force that operates in existentialism is our awareness of our own mortality, which is probably partially true, but that really misses the mark.
Can I tell you that I'm much more committed to that philosophy now that I'm 73 than I was 25 years ago.
Well, I thought that you were committed to it because you loved Irving Yalom.
Yeah.
who
Phenomenal
is
man.
one of the most profound influencers of existential psychology in our lifetime. So I've read Rollo May. I'm sure you've read Rollo May. I find him really hard to read, but I think that when you read a Rollo May book written in the 1960s, he could have written that book yesterday, and it would have been exactly the same. It's amazing how we think things change so foundationally, when in reality, the names of things change,
Right.
but the human experience does not.
We have a need to rename things and act like we just invented
Right.
them.
I mean, we have
Rollo
cell
May,
phones
Leo
now.
Buscaglia, another name from back then. He was called the Love Doctor.
Yeah, the Love Doctor.
Yeah. Irwin Yalom.
And Irwin Yalom, but that existential psychology really goes back all the way to Nietzsche and Kierkegaard, who promoted this idea of existentialism. We think about, I mean, everybody who wants to be cool talks about Soren Kierkegaard and Nietzsche. I don't remember what Nietzsche's first name was.
I'm not aware, Friedrich, that I have ever done that, because I apparently didn't have a need to be cool.
Not you, because you're not trying to be cool.
But you just said everybody.
But well, a lot of people who want to seem intellectual talk about, oh, I was reading Nietzsche, right? But these guys were the ones, I mean, so if you're a German hermit living in a cave writing philosophy, you know, you somehow that gives you credibility, I guess, which is fine. Maybe that's true, but people, I think, and they talk about how these guys were writing about how our fear of our own mortality is the motivational factor in our lives, and they miss what these guys were really talking about. Is these guys were saying you have to take responsibility for your life. That's the foundation of existential psychology, in my opinion.
So you think these deep thoughts, I always think of, was it Stuart Smalley? Deep Thoughts on Laugh-In? Not Laugh-In.
Saturday Night Live.
Saturday Night Live. I don't know that I ever had time to sit and do that. I was so busy living and trying to survive. And I read these things, and they made sense to me intellectually. They made sense to me logically. But experientially, you know, I would have said rather cavalierly, I understand that we all die, and I understand that I will die someday. Big deal. Right now, I've got to pay the rent next week, and I've got to find a job, and I have to get a license, and I have to do this or that or the other. And I'm just busy living. And the older I've gotten, the closer that deadline becomes for me. And I remember when my grandfather died. I was a young man. And my wife and I were having a conversation about the funeral or whatever. And I had a panic attack. I was hyperventilating. I was on the floor crying. And she's like, oh my God, what is it? What is it? And I said, I don't want to die. I mean, I was young and healthy. So I think the existential approach is a legitimate approach in trying to understand what motivates people or drives people to make the choices that they make. What are you in search of? What are you reaching for? What do you think is going to make you happy or less afraid or more secure or whatever it might be?
Viktor Frankl's seminal book on the subject is Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah. And Viktor Frankl said, because he spent time in a concentration camp in Germany in World War II, and he said, when you can't change the reality of your life, you're in a concentration camp, there are guards and dogs that'll kill you in a heartbeat if you look funny at them and you're trying to survive. If you can't change the reality, then you have to change your perception or definition of reality.
Right.
And so you have to find meaning where you are.
Right.
What can I learn from this experience? What
And
can
beauty.
I get out of this experience?
So Frankl told this story, and for people who are listening to this, if you've never been introduced to Viktor Frankl, if you take anything out of this discussion, I would just ask you to Google Viktor Frankl and just look at his story, because it's amazing.
Yeah.
But he told this story that he was in a so he went to the whole family went to Auschwitz. So he and his wife, I think her name was Tilly, went to Auschwitz with either her parents or his parents, and then they got separated. And she stayed at Auschwitz. The rest of the family stayed at Auschwitz. He was sent to Dachau, and she was actually gassed, and he didn't know until the Allies liberated the camp in 45. He didn't even know that the rest of his family was gone. And that was the only thing he said. That was the only thing that ever got him through, was thinking about them. And then afterwards he had to deal with the fact that they were gone. But he told this story that, there was a girl who was with her mom. So the girl's like 7 years old. And the guards are lining them up. And the left line goes to the gas chamber, goes to the showers, is what they called it. And then the right line goes to work detail. And so the guards are just lining people up. And I don't know if there was ever any kind of thought process in this, but the mom got placed in the left line and the girl got placed in the right line. And the girl kept wanting to run to the mom. And the mom knew that if the girl kept running to her, that the guards would say, oh yeah, just take her, right? And she didn't want that, so she kept telling the girl, it'll be fine, I'll see you afterwards. And the girl all of a sudden turned around and broke for the fence line, and so the guards all lift their machine guns, and she runs over to the fence line and picks a flower that's growing there and runs back and hands it to one of the guards. And he said that was a moment that changed his life, being able to find beauty even in that circumstance. And people would say to Viktor, how could you do that? How can you even say this? How can you were held against your will? And Viktor Frankl said, I was never held against my will. And people would say, what are you talking about? He said, you always had a choice. You could go out in a box, or you could choose to live. The choice was always yours. You may not like the choice, but you always have a choice, and you have to take responsibility for that choice.
So you can't just be a victim.
Right.
You can't excuse yourself from participation in life because
Right.
You're a victim with horrible life experiences. The other thing Viktor Frankl says in his writings is that you can find an amazing amount of love and beauty even in the most dire of circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who's starving, who takes their minimal amount of food and gives it to someone else who's starving worse. And that's a choice. If I die today from starvation, I die today from starvation, but I care enough about you or care enough about our common humanity that I'm willing to share with you something that's so critical for my own existence. And not with a return motive, not with a I expect you to do something for me tomorrow motivation, but from something within you that is beautiful, according to Viktor Frankl, and with which I agree. I think there are, in the depths of depravity that we sometimes are exposed to, there are things to see that are magnanimous and beautiful.
So let's take our break, and we will be right back. We'll talk more about this on the other side. Here at Psych with Mike, we are committed to delivering to you the best psychology information that we possibly can. And we want to make sure that that's always free. So we need everybody to go to the link that is in the show notes on the podcast page or in the show notes on the YouTube page and fill out a really quick, less than 10-second survey. That's going to help us to be able to attract advertisers to the show. That's going to let us take the show to the next level while still delivering the show in a free format. So please help us out. Share that information with everybody in your family, everybody that you know. The more responses that we get, the faster that we can get monetized, the faster that we can attract high-quality advertisers. We are committed to screening every advertiser that comes onto the show. So we're not going to be selling you things that we don't agree with or that we don't think are appropriate for the content of the show. But we do want to be able to upgrade the technical quality and the overall look of the show. So help us out. Go right now, click that link, fill out the survey, tell everybody you know to go and fill out the survey, and we really appreciate it. Thanks, and if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we're back. And, the thing that for me, I came to realize, and maybe this is me projecting meaning onto something in my life.
We do that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that that's okay. I don't think that's pathologic. But, I was 30 years old, and I was very aware that something was going on. I don't think that I know for a fact that I didn't call it an existential crisis at that time. When I look back on it now, it very clearly was that. And I think that it was that you, my belief in you as an existential therapist was really important because I was dealing with that. I think that that helped me to see that what we were doing there as credible. Because I mean, I don't want to say that I was clearly the best participant in your group class that you've ever had, but I had to be top.
You'd like for me to say that, though.
Well, I mean, yeah. I'm not. We're what we are now, so I don't need that affirmation.
I did have classes for 30 years.
Yeah.
With lots of people. So,
but I mean, I really took it seriously, and I was using it as therapy, and I don't know, I do know that nobody else in our class did that, and there were a lot of people who were intimidated by that, but you were giving us the opportunity and encouraging us to do that, and I said, I need this, and so I'm going to take this really seriously, and I'm going to really share. And I'm going to really be willing to expose myself, even if that isn't something that other people do. And even if what their perception of me is negative, my hope is that my livelihood will never depend on their impression of me. But I took it seriously. And thinking of you as an existential therapist was something that now when I look back on it, made a lot of sense because I know that that's what I was going through. But I thought that because you were so enamored with Dr. Yalom, I thought that, that must be what he subscribes to.
Yeah. I will remain enamored with Dr. Yalom and his approach and his understanding. I think I understand therapy as an opportunity to create a safe holding environment for somebody that's in pain, in trouble in some way, and offer them honest, accurate, empathic reflection of what I see in terms of their behaviors and in terms of the patterns that I hear about in their lives. And then support them as they explore the meanings of those options. Where did this come from? Why am I this way? Why does this happen in my life? What can I truly do? And we go down a lot of blind alleys, the whole victim script. I don't have any real choice. I have to do this. My family won't accept me if I do this. Well, what if you don't have this family? What if you had a different family? Oh, but I have this family. Well, yes, you do. And so what are the limits of how much control you're going to let them have? So you can explore conversations without shoulding them. Well, you should do this, without giving them an answer. Oh, you need to go get a new job. Your boss is an idiot. You don't approach it that way. And what I found with Yalom is that's the way that he seemed to approach things. His book, Love's Executioner, one of the best therapy books I ever saw, takes 10 patients and walks through his conversations with those patients. And he will share in the book what the client said, and then he'll share what his understanding of what the client said was and what his response was, and then what the client's response to his response. I mean, it just goes back and forth to the dialogue, the way that it happens in the therapy room with a client. I mean, that's what I saw. That's what I saw in 35 years of private practice. Yeah.
Actually, the Yalom section of the library is over by you.
Yeah.
Because of that.
I have noticed it. Yeah.
I only have 2 books, but that is the Yalom section.
Yeah. Well, he wrote more than 2 books.
I know, but I only have 2.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me whenever I teach the theories class, as I'm doing this semester, whenever I teach Adlerian theory, I'm like, oh, I should be Adlerian. Whenever I teach existential, I'm like, oh, I should be existential. And whenever I teach Gestalt, I'm like, oh, I should be Gestalt.
That's human nature.
Yeah.
And it's the same human nature that comes out when we study abnormal psychology. Because we study abnormal psychology and we study the different diagnostic categories and presentations, and people are like, oh my God, that's my mother. Oh, that's me. That's my sister. That's my next door neighbor. I mean, no matter what you are covering, we know somebody that has that symptomology, that behavior. I think we are drawn as human beings to a quest for an answer. We want an absolute right answer, something that will make us feel safe, something that will anchor us. If I just follow this path, I'll be okay. And I see that. I worry about that right now. We're taping this a week before the presidential election, or national election, not just presidential. And I am concerned about the level of emotionally antagonistic division in this country, that people that I respect and care about don't seem to have the capacity to hear beyond their own emotional interpretation of reality. And so when you try to talk facts about either side of an issue or either side of a candidate, they shut down. They can't come back with anything except "you're going to hell." You're wrong. I'm right, or my candidate, or my issue, or whatever the agenda is. And that really worries me about the future of our country. If we can't share our space with people with whom we disagree, if we can't share our space with people to the degree that we can have conversations and learn from one another, grow, I think we're in trouble.
And I think that the way that resonates with me, whenever, as I was saying, whenever I teach these theories, then I always say, oh, I should be that. And the truth is that all of us take different pieces, different aspects of many different theories, regardless of what our primary is. Yeah. And one of the
I take a lot of the Freudian stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think that both of us, well, you're more Freudian than I'm more psychodynamic, but yes, we subscribe to that theory because that makes sense to us from our experiences working with clients. But
our observations of life.
Both of us also are very much inclined to speak very bluntly to people and say, you can't be a victim, you have to take responsibility.
Well, it comes back to the existential
exactly
approach. I may use Freudian concepts to try to understand what drives specific behaviors or specific choices, but at the end of the day, so what I say to people that have abuse histories, you're not responsible for being abused.
Exactly.
Somebody else did that to you. And you can let that abuse limit your options. You can live out your life controlled by the abuser and the choices that they made for you. Or you can take your own path and put that down and create your own script. I had so many conversations with adolescents in particular. Do you want the script that your parents with whom you're fighting and having troubles wrote for you, or the school district or whomever? Or do you want to write your own script? And an analogy or an example that I would offer to them is you are currently, as a teenager, in the back seat of the car of your life, and the adults in the world are driving, whether that's the school, the police, your parents, whomever it might be, the judge. If you want to drive your own life, then you have to get in the front seat and drive.
Right.
But that means you have to take responsibility for the outcome.
Right.
That means you have to say, I decided to turn left or get off the highway at this location. So are you willing to do that?
And what I struggle with in that vein is credibility, I think, sometimes, even my own perception of it, because another one of Frankl's sayings was, no man can imprison you but you. You have to give someone permission to imprison you, because you have the right to experience your own life in your own way, no matter what. And so he didn't believe that the Nazis had imprisoned him. He believed that the Nazis did really cruel things, but that he had a life that was independent of that. And
which
he could
say
choose
to end at any time.
Exactly.
But he couldn't choose to walk out of the camp.
Right.
Yeah. So therein lies the conflict.
And so then people would say, well, but I don't want those choices. And Frankl said, doesn't matter whether you want those choices. Those are the choices you have.
Right.
And Frankl could say that because he had the tattoos.
He could say it with credibility.
Yeah, to say, I've lived this, so I have credibility.
I didn't choose. I've had kids say this to me. I didn't choose to be born in this family.
Right.
Said, well, no, you didn't, but you're there.
Exactly. So
and
you have responsibility.
Our challenge now is, how do we help you survive to the best outcome for what you want to live in life? You're 16. You have limited rights, limited options. Other people have power over you. Can you modify your anger and your behavior to the survivable point while you build a future and lay the foundation to go out and live your own life? Or are you going to have to act out in some way that gets you put in jail, where other people tell you what to do, or join the army where other people tell you what to do? Are you going to learn how to survive in one of these environments?
Right.
Through changing your perception. If you can't change the reality, you have to change your perception.
Right.
I said, I will agree with you that your mother's crazy as hell. but you have to deal with the fact that she is, and you have to deal with the ways in which she is, so that you can survive with the least amount of damage, and go out the other side of this room with the best options in front of you for what you want. So what do you want? If you could imagine an ideal situation, let's create it in this room. Let's talk about it.
And what I like to say is, just because you don't like the options doesn't mean you don't have a choice.
Right, absolutely.
And when people can wrap their head around that, if they can wrap their head around that, then they recognize that they do have options. They may be options that they don't like, but you always have an option, and you're always responsible for making a choice. As the great philosopher Geddy Lee told us, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice.
Yeah.
That's Rush from a song called Bathysphere. They were a Canadian rock band.
I don't care.
Okay.
I don't disagree with what you've said.
I know. I threw that in there because I didn't know if you would know the reference.
I did not know the reference.
Yeah.
But, interestingly enough, I'm not as concerned about references as I am about outcomes.
So, how do you resolve the conflict, the conundrum of telling people that they don't have to be a victim when they don't see the options?
Help them try to see the options.
Yeah.
Help them explore the possibility. What if? Let's imagine.
Do you feel like that's mean?
You know, I sometimes get attacked or criticized because I'm not conflict avoidant. I'm not afraid of conflict.
Yeah.
And I view my job as being a requirement that I have to identify the elephant in the room.
Right.
And so when I think I see it, I'll say, hey, I think I see an elephant. And everybody else will go, no, there's no elephant here. You're an idiot. You're a pervert. You're a weirdo. You're whatever. And okay, well, help me. Let's continue the conversation until I either see it accurately or you agree with me.
And I think that both of us fall into that category where we're willing to be honest and say the harsh things.
Somebody in here smells bad.
And a lot of people don't like that. And what I tell people all the time,
they don't want to do it. I mean, that was one of the challenges training people to be clinicians. I would have to ask them, can you imagine sitting in, for instance, a female? Can you imagine sitting in a room with a really angry male client who's almost out of control? Can you do that? And can you do that without being aggressive in response? Puff up
or defensive,
or defensive, or afraid to the point that you can't function.
Yeah.
If you can't do that, you can't go in with that client. You have to find other clients, and there are other clients out there. So you don't have to go work with these angry males.
Right.
But the odds are you're going to encounter them.
Yeah.
And are you grounded enough and focused enough that you can handle that?
And what I tell people all the time is, I'm not everybody's cup of tea.
Oh, no.
And if you don't want to work with me...
I know several people that think you're not their cup of tea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're probably right.
For them.
For them.
Yeah.
And so I'm not adverse to going into the room in any situation, and I feel confident in my ability to do good therapy regardless of what that situation presents. But some people don't like that, and I tell people all the time, you don't have to work with me.
No.
There are lots of other people in this world.
Yes.
And if what I am selling is not something you want to buy, don't buy it.
Right. I do the same thing. I say, come and see me. Let's spend 1 or 2 sessions together. If you and don't pay me. But if you decide to come back, then pay me for the 2 sessions that we had. So it's a free choice for you. You come and sit, because I think the relationship matters. I think the safety in the room matters. And if there's something about me, whether it's about me or it's about your projections onto me, that causes you not to be safe or not to be able to focus or make you be angry or disgusted, then let's acknowledge that and you go somewhere else, because it's important that you find somebody that you're safe with, that understands you, or you feel that they do, that you can get outside of your shield enough to look at what needs to be looked at. And if I'm not that person, I'm not that person. Okay.
And I feel like we're not really done with this, but we could probably do, hours.
We have done hours
on this. So we're going to end that. We're going to end this discussion here, and we may revisit this again sometime in the near future. But as always, the music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. We would love it if people would go to iTunes and rate us and leave us a comment, because that really helps out the show. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.